Though the Trump administration has repeatedly violated court orders since they returned to power 2 months ago, some disingenuous conservatives try to make excuses by saying, well, maybe there was a miscommunication by the court or a misunderstanding by Trump. Maybe they didn't realize that they were violating the court order. Well, we actually have confirmation from a top Trump official during a Fox News interview saying on camera that they don't care what federal judges say. They will continue to do whatever they want. It's explicit. The Trump administration has gone rogue and is willfully violating court orders, in addition to all the other evidence. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is Tom Homan, Donald Trump's really disgusting border czar. He's being interviewed by Fox and Friends, and the topic turns to Donald Trump's mass deportation program in which he has invoked ancient and rarely used war powers to facilitate. A federal judge recently blocked that attempt in a specific attempt to deport hundreds of Salvadorian migrants. We did a video about it. We'll discuss it in just a second. But here's Homan's response to the notion that federal judges may attempt to stop the Trump administration from what they want to do.
Tom, what's next? Because I'm getting a little worried about the manpower. These guys they have to be tired. You got 30 guys in the stack going on different busts every single day. You're going to run out of money. It doesn't look like you're getting support from the Democrats on this. You're going against the judges now. What's next?
Another flight. Another flight every day. The teams are going to be out there every day. Every day, the men and women of ICE are going to be in the neighborhoods of this nation arresting criminal, illegal alien, public safety threats, and national security threats. Lawrence, you're not going to stop us. We made a promise to the American people. The President Trump has made a promise to the American people. We're going to make this country safe again. I wake up every morning loving my job because I work for the greatest president in the history of my life, and we're going to make this country safe again. I'm proud to be a part of this administration. We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
Yeah. I just love seeing you going through these protesters just crunching on the apple as their liberal tears just flood the hallway. Tom Homan.
So, a couple things to unpack there. You heard it straight from the horse's mouth, or rather the jackass's mouth. He doesn't care what the courts say. He doesn't care what judges say. He said it explicitly. That is explicit confirmation that the Trump administration intends to willfully violate court orders. Now, could they change their mind? Sure. But have they done so already? Yes. Is the evidence mounting? Yes. It is bad faith and dishonest to suggest that there's some sort of labyrinthine, ambiguity here. Sure, they say they don't care what the judges say. Sure, they say that, he who saves his country violates no law, but there has to be a good faith reason. No, the good faith explanation is that they are intentionally violating court orders and daring the courts to try to stop them. They are morally inferior by this standard to any Democratic administration which has ever existed. And if that makes some people uncomfortable, sorry, sometimes two parties or two groups aren't equally good or equally bad, and the Republican Party, as led by Donald Trump, is just worse than the Democratic Party. Tom Homan is not the only example of prominent Republicans who have, on Fox News in the past 48 to 72 hours, defied or suggested that they intend to defy the courts. Here is Trump Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also indicating that judges have no authority to stop Trump.
He has been facing more resistance than anyone who has ever run for office in American history. And the mainstream media is part of that. But also, as you mentioned, we have judges in our judicial branch who are acting as activists, not real arbiters of the law. And there has been 15 injunctions in 1 month of President Trump's agenda. The Biden White House only faced 13 injunctions in the entirety of his presidency. And so clearly there are left-wing activists who sit behind a bench in a courthouse who don't like this president and his policies. But the fact is, everything President Trump is doing is within his executive authority to do it. He is acting within the bounds of the law. All of his actions are constitutional, and our White House and the entire administration are prepared to fight back against this resistance. Don't bet against President Trump. I think his epic return to the Oval Office proves that he is going to win against the weaponization of our justice system.
Yeah. So there you go. Caroline Leavitt indicating that she does not respect the court's ability to check Donald Trump, or doesn't seem that the Trump administration is obligated to adhere to court orders. Again, we're going to talk, just as a reminder, about my very complicated feelings about the dynamic between the judiciary and the other two branches. We'll get to that. But again, everything Donald Trump does is constitutional, it's perfect, it's legal. Also complaining about the disparate level and number of injunctions filed against Trump versus, or granted against Trump versus Biden. It could be that President Biden was just eminently more lawful than Donald Trump, and maybe your side is objectively worse. That's why they're being treated that way. Who knows? Here's another example from a different branch. Congressman Jim Jordan, Trump loyalist, also ranting about judges and questioning whether judges should be able to stop Donald Trump.
We said these federal judges, these district federal judges who issue some kind of injunction, some kind of hearing, or some kind of decision, I should say, that decision should only apply to the parties of the case in that respective jurisdiction, not have nationwide implications. So that's a step we took in committee 2 weeks ago to help deal with this problem. And we're willing to look at everything else as well, because the
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. Okay, I actually want to start, I guess, with Jim Jordan first, because I'll probably forget it. Jim Jordan, I can't believe that these federal judges are like issuing like nationwide injunctions, except that's exactly what Republicans did with Judge Kaczmarek, a Trump appointee out of Texas. They did it a lot. Okay, so they love judge shopping, forum shopping to get a preferred federal judge who is conservative or aligned with MAGA, and that guy is eager to issue nationwide injunctions, like over birth control drugs, if I remember correctly. So like, they have no problem with that whatsoever. A crackdown on judge shopping provoked a rather telling Republican reaction. On Tuesday, the little-known Judicial Conference of the United States made some unusual headlines by announcing a new effort to make it harder for plaintiffs in certain cases challenging state or federal policies to handpick the specific judge who hears the case. The crackdown on judge shopping is long overdue. It's also provoked a rather telling reaction from various Republican lawmakers. And so it goes into this, and it gives the example, again, Matthew Kaczmarek. Although this reality isn't new, plaintiffs have increasingly taken advantage of these single-judge divisions to steer nationwide federal policy challenges to specific ideologically sympathetic judges. For example, the nationwide challenge to the Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone was filed in Amarillo, Texas, not a courthouse with any specific connection to mifepristone, but one in which it had a 100% chance of being assigned to a certain Trump-appointed district judge, former anti-abortion advocate Matthew Kaczmarek. And Matthew Kaczmarek issued a nationwide injunction against mifepristone. So again, when Jim Jordan comes to you and says, oh, we shouldn't be able to judge shop for judges who issue nationwide injunctions, I agree, but your side does it, which means you have no credibility, which means we get to call you hypocrites and mock you relentlessly and bask in our moral superiority. And you also had the opportunity to crush judge shopping because there was legislation to do just that, and Republicans opposed it. Again, they have no credibility on this issue. You are not obligated to take them seriously. They love to judge shop, and they love to judge shop for judges who will issue nationwide injunctions when it benefits them. So he's objectively wrong, and we are objectively right, per usual. Now, getting back to Tom Homan, again, I want to remind you of the recent development regarding the migration, or rather the deportation of Salvadorian migrants. So how the White House ignored a judge's order to turn back deportation flights. The administration's decision to defy a federal judge's order is exceedingly rare and highly controversial. Quote, court order defied, first of many as I've been warning, in the start of a true constitutional crisis, said National Security Attorney Mark S. Zaid, a Trump critic who wrote on X. The White House welcomes the fight. Quote, this is headed to the Supreme Court and we're going to win, said a senior White House official. And that may indeed be true given the composition of the court. A second administration official said Trump was not defying the judge whose ruling came too late for the planes to change course. Very important that people understand we are not actively defying orders. And again, this refers to Judge Boasberg, who issued a block of Trump's citation of the Alien Enemies Act of 1789 to basically unilaterally deport these migrants on the grounds that they've been, we're in a state of war against, illegal or undocumented immigrants. So, having said that, though, if you read the article more thoroughly, they discuss that their rationale for not turning the flights around was because they were over international flights. Officials discussed whether to order the planes to turn around. On advice from a team of administration lawyers, the administration pressed ahead. There was a discussion about how far the judge's ruling can go under the circumstances and over international waters, and on the advice of counsel, we proceeded with deporting these thugs That's a quote from a senior official. They were already outside of U.S. airspace. We believe the order is not applicable. So they knew, they got the judge's order, but they were like, it doesn't apply here. So on that topic, Judge Boasberg schedules a hearing for 4 p.m. today on the government's notice and plaintiff's response. Notes that the government shall be prepared to provide answers to questions raised by plaintiffs on page 6 of their response. Number 1, those questions include whether any flight with individuals subject to proclamation took off after either the court's written or oral orders were issued, whether any flight with individuals subject to proclamation landed after either the court's written or oral orders were issued, whether any flight with individuals subject to the proclamation were still in the air after either the court's written or oral orders were issued, and whether custody of any individual subject to the proclamation was transferred to a foreign country after the court's written or oral orders were issued. Those are some of the questions indeed. So again, folks, this is so important to note that the evidence has been clear, be it temporary restraining orders or this proclamation from Judge Boasberg, that the Trump administration is intending to, perhaps not in every instance, but that they feel that they have the right to defy the courts, that they can ignore the courts. And then you have a top Trump official on a top Trump-aligned, Trump-sympathetic media network celebrating, yes, we don't care what the courts say, we don't care what the judges say, we will do what we want. You have never heard anything like that from the Biden administration, from the Obama administration. This is a new level of disregard for the courts. We'll simply close by saying this. As you know, I have an issue with the notion of judicial supremacy. We live in a system of checks and balances where Congress is, quite frankly, supposed to be the most powerful branch. And the judiciary is intended to be the weakest branch. Still powerful, still important, but they're not supposed to be equal. Congress is on top, the judiciary is on bottom, the president's supposed to be in between. It doesn't mean the judiciary still shouldn't be able to check or influence or potentially stop the president, but this idea of 3 co-equal branches, that's actually not in the Constitution. But what's even more offensive is this notion of judicial supremacy, where the court gets to dispense checks and balances, where they get to tell Congress no or the president no, but not be told no in return. I do have a huge issue with that, and I still have an issue with it. But my objections are principled and consistent no matter who is president. I don't like the idea that there is nothing that can check a federal judge or a Supreme Court. Now, federal judges can be checked by other federal judges higher up in the food chain in the appellate process, and ultimately the Supreme Court, but that's where this is headed. Once this gets to the Supreme Court, they can overrule Judge Boasberg or Judge Kaczmarek for that matter, but who checks the Supreme Court? Really nobody in practice, and I have an issue with that, given that the Supreme Court is rife with ethics violations, that there's no body to really investigate or force an investigation or enforce a code of conduct. I have huge issues with that because it means the president can and should be checked, and that Congress can and should be checked, but the Supreme Court of the United States can't be checked. And I do have an issue with that no matter who is president and no matter what sort of composition of the court it is. Liberal justices should also have a binding code of conduct that they, if they violate, should face steep penalties for it. They should be audited to hell and back. They should not be able to receive gifts. There should be steep penalties for violations of financial disclosures and ethics disclosures. There should be a reviewable recusal process. If there's a conflict of interest, that should be able to be adjudicated. If you choose not to recuse yourself, we demand an explanation, a written essay as to why. And I think that would go a long way to restoring faith in the court. But that's not what we're hearing from Caroline Leavitt and Jim Jordan or Tom Homan. They love this right-wing rogue court when it benefits them, and then they want the ability to give it the finger whenever the court or the judiciary or even the Supreme Court doesn't do what they want to do. That's hypocritical, that's unprincipled, and that's a problem. But it is a fact. The Trump administration is willfully, gleefully violating court orders. And if that matters to you, if it would matter to you if a Democrat did it, it should matter to you when Trump does it. But that only matters if you're principled. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.